I think it's important to understand something about the theoretical basis of the Myers-Briggs Typology Indicator before we look at some applications of the MBTI to prayer practices and spiritual types. Any study of Myers-Briggs must begin with a study of Carl Jung. While Jung is not the focus of this presentation, he is important to note. Carl Jung, aside from Sigmund Freud, was one of the most important persons in modern psychology and psychiatry. He was born in Keswil, Switzerland in 1875. He studied medicine at the School of Basel, and he studied psychology in Paris. He became a physician in Zurich and a lecturer in psychiatry, and he traveled around the world. In 1912, he founded his own school of psychology in Zurich. He then became a professor of psychology. Catherine Briggs, born 1875 in Michigan, was a passionate student of people and sought to understand their differing personality types. In 1923, Carl Jung's book, Psychological Types, was published in English, and this work formed the basis of Briggs' original approach to the theory of personality. Briggs' daughter, Isabel, was born in 1897, and as she grew up, she eagerly shared her mother's research interests. The mother-daughter team worked together for several decades, devising a way to measure and categorize the various personality types. In 1962, Isabel Briggs Myers published a guide to the development and use of Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, or MBTI, which illuminated the accumulated wealth of the data on the development of the measurement tool and its applications. Myers continued to research and compile data on the usefulness of the MBTI until her death in 1980. In 1985, a second edition of Myers' earlier MBTI manual was published by a team of researchers led by Mary H. Macaulay. The 1985 edition is supplemented by the original work of Isabel Myers, whose written records and research from 1962 to 1980 form the basis of the manual. Myers-Briggs, along with a number of other notable researchers and practitioners, tested and developed applications of the MBTI over 4 decades. Their work is widely esteemed by educators, psychologists, clergy, and business people from all over the world. Based on Jung's theory of personality, Myers-Briggs proposed 16 personality types that are formed using a combination for preferences for A, how we collect information, B, how we use information in decision-making, and C, our attitudes towards external and internal realities. How we collect information is known as our perceiving function. The way we use information in decision-making is known as our judging function. And our attitudes towards external and internal realities are what Jung named extroversion and introversion. The perceiving function is how we collect information, and we collect it in one of 2 ways, either sensing or intuiting. The preference for sensing means that we collect information through concrete, observable data. Observation takes place not just through sight, but through hearing, smell, taste, and touch. There is also a preference for collecting information in the moment, the here and now. The preference for intuition, on the other hand, means that we collect information through a 6th sense, a gut feeling. Instead of collecting information in the moment, we collect information and project out its usefulness for some future project. We use information in decision-making in one of 2 ways, thinking or feeling. Thinkers collect information and then begin to process process it in logical categories. Say a thinker is in shopping for a car. She has collected all the information, either through sensing or intuition, and now it's time to make a decision. The thinker will decide on the basis of statistics about the car, the best value, gas mileage, meets how a particular need, etc. The feeler, on the other hand, will use the information and decide on the basis of personal values or ethical considerations. For example, the Prius may not be the better value than the Mazda 3, but because someone places a high value on driving green, he will choose the Prius over the Mazda. Myers-Briggs named the 4 primary personality types by the letters that represent the perceiving and judging functions. Therefore, the 4 primary types are designated as NF, NT, SF, and ST. The perceiving function, how we collect information, is represented by the second letter in the MBTI formula, intuition or sensing, N or S. The judging function, that is, how we use information to make decisions, is represented by the third letter in the MBTI, thinking or feeling, T or F. One of these functions is dominant and one is auxiliary. All of us have some facility with all 4 functions, thinking, feeling, intuiting, sensing, but each of us has a preference for which function we rely on most of the time. Myers-Briggs named this strongest preference, very creatively, our dominant function. The function that is not dominant is called the auxiliary function. In order to indicate the dominant function, Myers-Briggs created a 4th letter, a category that was implicit in Jung's theory but not fleshed out. This 4th category, what Myers-Briggs named the P or the J, points to which function we prefer to exhibit in our external world. If you have a P in your MBTI, it means that your perceiving function, the S or the N, is what you exhibit to the world. If you have a J, your judging function, the T or the F, is what you show to the world. This slide looks very similar to one we saw previously, but here we see the significance of the 4th letter. Which do you prefer to show the world? Here's the interesting thing. Not everyone wants to show their dominant function to the world. Who do you suppose is the most comfortable showing their dominant function to the world around them? Extroverts. Of course. Introverts, on the other hand, use their strongest function for processing the inner world of ideas, concepts, and spirituality. That's why we sometimes get the feeling that it's harder to get to know introverts. They show their strengths only to a close circle of friends, while introverts prefer to use their auxiliary function when dealing with the external. Extroverts prefer to use their auxiliary function in dealing with their inner world. Here's one example using an NF. The J and the P do not have meaning apart from the E or the I attitudes. It's fairly straightforward if you are an E, but if you are an I, it requires an extra step that can be a little confusing because the 4th letter indicates which function we externalize. E's externalize their dominant function, while I's externalize their auxiliary function. The JP index is designed to describe the process a person uses primarily in dealing with the outer world. That is, with the extroverted part of life. A person who prefers judgment, or J, has reported a preference using a judging process, either thinking or feeling, for dealing with the outer world. A person who prefers P has reported a preference for using a perceiving process, either S or N, for dealing with the outer world. I hope everyone is following how to determine the dominant function. But just in case, here's a little cheat sheet. You may want to try and figure out on your own which is your dominant function, and then you can compare it to this chart to see if you've calculated correctly.